couple of things that we're going to discuss, and it's completely unscripted today.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a podcast episode. Well, we have spent a lot more time lately in the last few weeks on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
collecting
Yes.
insights and understanding what leaders are looking for and what challenges they're facing, what struggles
Mhm.
they have, and we've observed a lot of helpful things. One is that there's not a lot of talk about brain and leadership, so we're
Mhm.
trying to bring that to our audience. But there's a lot of things on LinkedIn that I think both of us have flagged and want to talk about here because there's some content that is perhaps um, counterproductive, especially for people who are trying to move into leadership roles or who
Mhm.
are trying to develop their leadership skills. And
Mhm.
frankly, we just couldn't wait anymore to have this conversation.
I think it's exactly because we talked a lot about these things as we
Yeah.
were going through them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, LinkedIn at the moment, it's just so easy to create content, right? Everything is
Hmm.
automatically generated. They follow the very same
Yeah.
scripts and appearances. They seem to be repeating the same messages, but we have quite an extensive experience working with people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of those things that are commonly repeated are harmful, right?
Yeah.
Or so far away from reality
Yeah.
that, to be honest, we don't really know why they're put out there in the first place, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I understand that people might be nodding because it sounds like it's or feels familiar or real,
Or it's visually appealing,
or
but if you
visually,
dig into
yes.
what it's really saying, I think we want to share our opinions on this from from an objective standpoint, knowing what has worked and what doesn't work.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the most important thing, right? It's not about repeating what's commonly found on the internet. It's
Hmm.
about, well, this is this theme of operationalizing knowledge, right? Making
Yeah.
sure that things work in practice.
Yeah.
Because there's a massive difference between what you can read in a book and then what works in a real life.
Yeah.
And there are also things that work in real life, but no one has wrote about as well.
That's right.
Yes. And we use this analogy from clinical practice. I think that's where it's most prominent as well. And I think it's intuitive to people and to listeners, would be easy to understand the examples that we're typically giving. Would you rather go to or would you rather, if you see a doctor, right, would you rather have visit someone who has read every book there is, right, and then allow that person to operate on you or on your children?
Hmm.
Or would you rather go to someone to a surgeon who has done something 1,000 times
Hmm.
rather than read 1,000 books? Which
Hmm.
one would you trust more and why?
Right.
Right, because it's fairly intuitive, right? That it's experience that matters,
Right.
not that. Yes, and the other thing is, of course, we like this, love this example from ChatGPT, right? If you ask to generate an image showing a watch face, let's say we're at showing a time 5:15,
Hmm.
it's completely unable to do this, and it
Hmm.
baffles people. Like, why is it that I always get the arms 10 after 10?
Hmm.
Right. And the truth
Hmm.
is because most people don't really fully understand how generative artificial intelligence works. But what it does, it repeats to you or gives you back what is most commonly found on the internet.
Yeah.
Now, most common is neither true nor correct nor meaningful or anything like that.
Right.
And
Right.
that's why we see this plethora, the floods of this generic contents, right? Repeating the same things all over again, like if it was true, but it isn't.
Right.
Yes. And my children are always fascinated by this, right?
Hmm.
How, why is it so difficult? Well, it isn't. It's just the way it works. You spits out what's common.
Right.
And in advertising, watch clocks, and 10 after 10 are typically found to be appealing to people. So ChatGPT believes that's what every watch face looks like because that's what's most commonly available. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly. It's marketing, the average of marketing,
That's
successful marketing.
exactly. Now,
And
this
the
is
same is true for some of the material and the content that gets generated for things like,
totally.
the 5 most effective leadership skills or 10 ways to be, I don't know, 10 ways to walk into the room or something. It's all based on the average of what's already existing, which
Mhm.
isn't necessarily the same as knowledge.
That's
And
one.
that's
And
one.
not the same as being true, right? Like that's another thing to
No.
look at. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to our commentary today and our just sort of casual conversation on the solutions manual is to give some of the examples that we found particularly concerning. You're listening to the Solutions Manual podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share with your favorite brain. A lot of this is being generated the same way 10 after 10 is being generated, this average. And
Absolutely.
we recently heard from Sir Muir Gray with the Oxford Longevity Project.
Mm-hmm.
The quote, "The elixir of life is knowledge, and knowledge is not just reading the 1,000 books. It's balancing the information that you take in and then actually doing the thing that you are reading or extending it, right? That's what learning is. It's not just the information." So we want to
It's more. It's not just information. Learning is predominantly doing.
yes, right.
Information, high quality information, carefully selected to or allow you to better practice certain areas is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing is doing. Like doing trumps knowledge, experience trumps knowledge every time.
Yeah, every time. Yeah. So why don't we start with some examples?
Great. Shall I kick off with the first one that I think
yeah, let's start with the first one.
Okay. So this is a post that we have found on LinkedIn, and it is repeated multiple times by multiple people who call themselves leaders or people who call themselves coaches or people who call themselves experts
mm-hmm.
in leadership. And it starts like that. There's an infographic mm-hmm. of sorts, and it says 10 things that require zero talent.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes. I'm going to start with this one. And
yeah.
It says, and it's 10 things, and it's visually appealing. It looks cool. It has these nice little lines and those icons. And it's like, you look at this and say, wow, this must be true. And it says 10 things that require zero talent: being on time, your work ethic, effort, and energy. Oh, and by the way, on this in particular infographic, the order of those is switched. So someone didn't pay close attention. And then you have body language, passion, being prepared, doing extra, being coachable, and being kind. Well, these are the things that require zero effort, zero talent. There's nothing. Zero talent. Yes. Now, this particular post had 18,000 likes, responses, and reactions within the first 3 days from being posted.
Wow. Okay.
It had over 300 comments at the time when I looked at this, and more than 2,500 people reposted that post to others.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Clearly must be great, right? It's all over the place. And multiple, and we're just talking about this one. There are numerous iterations. So similar message, sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 6, right? It's different graphics, different name, but the message is the same. There are things that require zero talent. Now, it might be, it sounds plausible, right? Oh, how difficult it will be. Just show up on time, be this, be that, be kind, be nice, lead, have a great work ethic. But we actually work with people to put them in leadership roles, right? To help them nail the workplace.
Right.
Make sure that they, get promoted fast, they get results quickly, they free up time for things that matter to them.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tear this apart. So the first one is being on time requires zero talents. Well, it doesn't. And we know that because the concept of time itself requires a lot of cognitive understanding, but being on time requires discipline, requires time management skills. And there are courses and people in books specializing in just this one aspect.
Right.
It requires forward planning, forward thinking, huge degree of self-management, time and space to be able to do it, right? And the more packed your diaries get and the more competing objectives you need to cram into your day, the more difficult it becomes.
Right.
Like we have courses, one of the most popular ones, when we are teaching people about the resources, including using time as a resource, and how to navigate multiple competing objectives, because it's an extremely complex thing to do well.
Right.
And despite the best efforts, like I sometimes get late for meetings or unable to attend the events that I would really want to, or I previously said I will attend, purely because of the unpredictability of the it's the nature of the planning process, right? Not everything always goes as planned.
Right.
Yes. So being on time, it's difficult.
Yeah, and even if you are organized and you maybe have a natural proclivity for for your schedule and management of time, it's still takes practice and intentionality to be able to do this, which is not a which is a talent, but still needs
skill.
to be,
Yes.
yeah, developed and practice. It's not that you, especially as you move up and your responsibilities change, and that ability to be able to be on time or not, or be in the right place at the right time is more critical. So yeah, I fully agree with that.
Yes. And there are multiple situations, occasions, industries, and work settings where we can talk about this. And don't forget that we're all humans, right? There are also things that are happening in your private life.
Yeah.
And the next one on the list, let's just go quickly through them, was work ethic, right? Like if it was something easy, but it isn't. Giving full effort, right? And having a high work ethic, as it's typically described, is another hugely complex cognitive task. It requires focused attention, competence, right, to do the work in the first place. You need to be great at prioritizing, which is like you need to capitalize on the skill that we just talked in the previous point above. You need to be great at resisting distractions, right, which are in order to have this great work ethic. You need to have energy, ability, and capacity to deliver work at that level, to give the full effort. So again, extremely complex thing. Now stemming beyond the cognitive ability per se, right? It also how you feed yourself, how you maintain your levels of energy, right? How fit you are to deliver that. Because all these things play into how quickly you get tired, how quickly you run out of energy, how quickly your integrity goes away. It also depends on your work environment. It depends on the people you're working with. It's an extremely difficult thing to get right for yourself or for your own business. And sometimes might not be possible if you work for someone else.
Right.
So saying that it requires zero talent, it's just stupid. Let's be honest. The next one I think was effort, right? It's the same thing, right? It requires discipline, resilience, being in the right environment, commitment, consciousness, integrity, like all these things play together. Massively complex thing to do.
Yeah.
Energy requiring no effort, right? This is something that you're an expert in, right? We take people who have little mental, physical, and emotional energy, and we work with them slowly over weeks or months sometimes to start improving it.
Yes. Right.
Right. And it requires ongoing effort.
Yes.
And the recognition of the fact that as you're getting older, that resource declines. And it's inevitable. So maintaining it or slowing the rate of decline is not only difficult, it's also necessary. And
and just because, just going back to the people that maybe you can think of who are really, let's say, good at this, good at doing this, or your perception of how they manage this, you think that they're good at this. Well, even if someone, again, has a tendency or a natural ability
Yes.
above average to be able to manage their energy in a way that allows them to be more productive or work better or get more out of the same amount of time, doesn't mean that they don't constantly check in with the awareness of that energy and then the decisions that they make to maximize it or optimize it. And we haven't talked about this in a while here, but
Mm-hmm.
if that happens to be someone's, let's say, talent, to use the word, then that is a strength that they have. And
Yes.
those people who are successful are most likely to be continuously working on that strength anyway, because
Yes.
as you work on it, you will reap benefits in a much more in a bigger way. You'll get more benefits from it. And again, the more you work on your strengths, or let's say your natural talents, the more benefit you'll also get to some of your other
Yes.
weaknesses or some of the other skills that maybe aren't as natural for you or
Yes.
strong. So
Absolutely.
automatically, without working on the weaknesses specifically, we
Yes.
talk about that separately. So
Yeah.
like it's not even that it doesn't require talent, and it's not even that it doesn't require, like, having awareness is just one small piece.
Yeah.
It's the daily effort that then gets put into working on that strength, and that
Mm-hmm.
in this situation to maximize your energy
Yeah.
so that you can continue to do it and get better at it.
Yes. And the habits that you need to build around this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And both your mental
Yeah.
habits, your physical habits, right? Your movement habits, your nutritional
Yeah.
habits,
That
that all contributes to maintaining high energy levels. And
yeah.
that's one of the most difficult things to do.
Yeah.
And saying it requires zero talent, like I really struggle to understand why would you even say that to people
Yeah.
unless your goal is to bring them down and make them feel miserable, because I really don't see another. This is an extremely difficult thing which requires conscious effort to do that,
Mhm.
and it's necessary,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because will never be as strong and fit and having as much energy as we have today,
Right.
right? Unless we consciously put a lot of time and effort into maintaining it. So it's important to think about ourselves on a certain timeline, and
Yeah.
how are we going to manage our energy levels 10 years from now?
Mhm.
Right? So the time for building that habits, that resilience is now. And yeah, it requires a lot of skill. It
Yeah.
also requires a lot of skill to understand and to be able to teach this.
Mhm.
What was the next one? The next one was body language, right? Which is
Oh, okay.
which is that's another area that is just filled with crap, right? I mean, the amount of repeated bullshit information about body language is on the internet. It's tremendous, but it requires conscious awareness of yourself. It requires practicing of those skills. It requires knowing what they are in the first place, right? Before you are able to behaviorally analyze other people,
Yeah.
you need to be a conscious user of your own body language. And those are things that need to be trained. They are not natural to many people.
Yeah.
A lot of them,
This is like linguistics and signaling is a very specialized part of intelligence for a reason,
yes,
right? Yeah.
absolutely, right. And there are a lot of skills in that particular space that are not even taught to civilians, right?
Mhm.
They're reserved for interrogators or for environments that again are not typically discussed in a public space. And even reading or learning about those topics requires specialized access and
Mhm.
knowledge that is not publicly available. And there are experts who spend and dedicate their entire life just to
Yeah.
doing one thing of behavioral profiling based on people's body language, right? There are coaches and media experts who train people in just doing that. You
Right.
need to exaggerate gestures, right?
Right.
For example, if you appear on TV or if you show up on stage,
Right.
It's not natural. It's something that needs to be trained and practiced to maintain.
Right. Yep. Good example.
Yeah. And then what was the next one? Next one was passion, right? That's another topic that we talk about, right? I mean, how many of you are really passionate about sending emails in the office? Right. And being able to find that in that motivation in yourself, that ability to push through certain things in order to deliver, that's difficult, right? Passion requires, you need to cultivate this. Otherwise, it goes away. You need to find and discover it in yourself as well, right? It's not an easy and natural thing to do. And then we have, I think the next one was being prepared, right? Again, preparedness is its own category of skill. It
Yeah.
requires planning, resource planning, forward planning, strategic thinking, conscientiousness, diligence. It needs daily maintenance and practice of those skills, and most importantly, the ability to defer gratitude, right? Because you're putting things for your future self. Those
Mhm.
are important habits, but they require a lot of effort. That's not a zero talent activity.
Right.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing to get right. Now, doing extra, I don't really know what that means, right? Because doing more is not necessarily even a good thing in the first place.
Mhm. What
You
does it
can
say?
be,
Sub description of this? No.
no, this is just this is something that apparently requires zero talent, right? Maybe this is the only one we can agree with, right? It's easy to do things that doesn't move you forward. So
Okay.
you create an environment for yourself
Though
where
I would argue that sometimes it takes talent to really procrastinate too. So
it's a
just
specific talent, specific
just
type of
saying.
talent.
Yeah.
But it's not easy, right? And doing more or going beyond on its own, just think about this for a minute. Doing extra, whether maybe this is what the employer wants you to do, or maybe this is something that you need for yourself.
Mhm.
First, you need to do what's expected
Yeah.
before you can go extra and take the
And
next step.
understand what the big picture is to know what would even be valuable extra work.
That's it. So not only you need to deliver on what's expected to go above and beyond, and sometimes that is difficult to do on its own,
Yeah.
but then you need to have time, energy, money, skill,
Mhm.
ability, and willingness to go the extra mile.
Yeah.
If this requires zero talent, well, you're lucky, right? I mean, it really, like, if this is something that comes to you naturally and you can always do that across all domains, whether it's at work or at home or for yourself, well done, right? But we know from the people that we work with, that's one of the most difficult things to do. And by
Mhm.
the way, not always necessary.
Right.
Yes, yes. So that's, again, blows my mind even putting it there. What were the other two that we've mentioned? There was one about being coachable,
Oh,
right? Or professional. It's like professionalism requires training, years of it, right? The growth, the competence that you're building. And being coachable requires a certain degree of openness, of awareness, of ability to trust someone to guide your growth and development. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. Like, most of us are not coachable.
no, there's a lot of acceptance and ego that get in the way of being coachable, right?
Most of us already believe that we know everything, but we know from sports, for example, that's a little bit more intuitive, right?
Mhm.
Everyone who achieves above and beyond certain standard, like if you look at the elite athletes, the top 1,000, like all of them are coached. They cannot get into a certain place by yourself,
Mhm.
because most people don't realize that the thing that holds you back the most is yourself.
Mhm.
And you
Right.
need an extra set of eyes to do that. But most people, unfortunately, are not coachable.
Yeah, and these there's a synonym for these elite athletes called talent. So, as a noun. So it's
Yes.
completely counterintuitive or it's completely counterintuitive to the message.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's the opposite, right? It
Yeah.
requires hell of a lot of talent and then a certain mindset in
Mm-hmm.
order to even be coachable, right? So
Right.
and again, kindness,
Mm-hmm.
peace, compassion, connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Energy and resources to do this, right? It's easy to be kind in the right environment. It's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to be kind in other. Like, so again, these are extremely difficult things to develop for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be mindful, like when you read or those things, or when you repeat them, or when you repost them, you might be bringing a lot of people down, making them feel bad about themselves, because it look, oh, these, they struggle to do any of those things, but they're being told they require zero effort, right? That's very worrying, at
Yeah.
least from our point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, this post, so many engagements, so many reposts, so many repetitions. Somehow it resonates with people, but be wary. Like if you really think that that's true, then just start rethinking. Um, maybe people repost this because they want to be seen as people who can do all these things effortlessly, but that's not the case for most.
Yeah. No. Especially someone who you might think of who's a great leader or someone
Absolutely.
you would be willing to follow, right?
Mhm.
Think about what kind of effort and intention they put into these kind of small,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one. It's
Shoot.
also a an infographic.
Mhm.
And this is the 10 hats you wear as a great leader.
10 hats you wear as a leader.
Hats
Okay.
you wear.
10.
There's 10.
10
So
of them. Okay.
how many fedoras can we put on top of each other? Okay, so we have the compass, we have the mentor, the
Hmm.
coach, the defender,
Uh-huh.
the translator,
Hmm.
the cheerleader,
Okay.
the therapist,
Mm.
the janitor,
Wow.
student, and the mirror. So most of
Okay.
those are probably self-explanatory in terms of the current leadership vernacular on LinkedIn. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
so this had almost 7,000 likes, love, support, and 1,500 reposts.
Wow. So
And a bunch of comments.
very popular
Fun.
as well.
Yes, and a bunch of comments. And the main question in the comments for people to answer was, what am I missing? What other hats should I add? Okay, so my opinion on this
More. Okay. Okay.
is that like you should trade in all the hats for maybe just the human
Mm-hmm.
and putting constantly, like I understand using hats as the metaphor for the different, let's say, roles
Mm-hmm.
that a great leader would be taking with their individuals or teams, but to me this idea of switching hats and faking your way through a particular role
Mm-hmm.
is have could have exactly the opposite effect on
Yeah.
your ability to become, grow, develop as a leader. So I don't think it allows people to be present, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly adjusting, or this idea of adjusting into a certain role. Now, should a leader or could a leader adapt to their environment and be able to
Mm-hmm.
serve their team and serve the business or whatever they're doing effectively and appropriately and professionally? Yes, but to
Yes.
take on these masks or these roles that are taking away or just reinforcing stereotypes in certain types of
Mm-hmm.
conversations, I think is not just a disservice to the leader, but a disservice to the people on the team as well.
But it's also the reality of this, right? I mean, can you, because some of them sound very contradictory to one another.
Mhm.
Can you really be one person on one day and a completely different person
I
with a
don't think
completely
so.
different approach on another?
No, I don't
Like,
think so.
really? Like,
And what role, what job are you in that you would require you to be doing
all of
all
these things? Yeah.
kinds of things? Can you even do all of these things?
And even if you could, how well?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because we know that when it comes to developing your skills,
Mhm.
that it's much better to be focusing on your strengths, right, rather than on your weaknesses, because otherwise you're just not making the required progress, right?
Yes. Yes. And I think that there is how you handle a conversation with a team, with your team or with a colleague or an interview or a presentation isn't you putting on a hat and stepping into a role. It's your understanding of this integration of your abilities, your responsibilities, and the whole purpose of as to why you're even having that discussion or conversation in the first place.
Absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
you are a new leader or you're new to, let's say, people management, and you have never managed people before. Okay, so well, you were still hired into that role based on the skills and, let's say, coachability that you have. Otherwise, maybe you wouldn't be hired into that role. But that doesn't mean that you now need to pretend to be like, just
Someone
do
else.
the authentic thing and develop the skills that
Yes.
make you effective for what you are hired to do. It's a
Hmm.
job, and would help you develop the skills maybe that you have
Yeah.
already that got you to that role in the first place.
Yes. Although none of those skills could actually make you a good leader as well, or nor manager. I think that's something. Not everybody needs to be a leader,
Right.
right?
Right.
And not everybody wants to.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that they
hmm
don't really want to before they get promoted into those roles or those places.
hmm
But I think that what is important here to say is, like, with all these, this is what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, right? The difference between what's written in the internet about real life.
Yeah.
Because practically, you will default to certain styles and preferences that you have been born with most of the time. And you
hmm
might try to stretch yourself to be a different person, but it's fundamentally almost always impossible. And we believe that everyone is born with a certain tendencies or predispositions towards only two leadership styles, right? That's how we call them. And they're pretty much mindset dependent. And none of them is better or worse than any other,
Yeah.
right? We call them, so there's a group of people that are great at starting things.
hmm
They come up with new ideas, they kick things off, they inspire people to do new things, to change, to generate novelty in a way, to try things in a different way, right? And that's something that's very deeply inherent to who you are as a person.
Right. Right.
Those people struggle after they start something up with running
To sustain
that
it.
idea
Yeah.
to with because the other type of, let's say, the natural predisposition or the opposing end of this is a person who can daily manage in a repeated way certain established tasks and practices, right? Let's say in a much more that in an environment that is stable, predictable, and ongoing.
hmm
Those people will struggle with new ideas, with changes, with reforms,
Yeah.
right? In the same way as the first group would struggle with the daily running of the business.
Right.
And you can, if you have a preference right now that you have identified for one or the other, you will immediately see how difficult for you would be to do the opposite.
Yes.
And now, if
And how wearing a hat doesn't automatically make you
a
good
good at something,
at being the other way. And that's
that's it.
another way of putting a lot more energy than someone who wouldn't need
Yes,
to not get you as far as just handing over the responsibility.
yeah, that's it. Because you're wasting your time and energy
Yeah. Yeah.
to learn something that someone else is naturally good at, which they
Yeah.
achieve a higher level of competence
Yeah.
with a fraction of the effort that you will need to put into.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we also know that in high performing environments, we call this dual leadership model. This
Mhm.
is not really well established or known in businesses just yet because it's probably all about money, and businesses care about every person being able to do everything, so they're mostly replaceable in organograms. But
Mhm.
in environments where performance really matters, that dual leadership model exists.
Right.
And right, whether this is a military environment, whether it's certain clinical environments where you have
Mhm.
two people in one leadership role or roles who simply hand over tasks from one another when it's necessary.
Right.
So everything works well. There's one person leading the business or the organization or the operation. And
Yeah.
when something doesn't work, it's handed over to another person who will look at this and say, okay, this does not work. This is how we're going to do. Here's my ideas. Here's the plan. Here we're going to implement this. We're going to change. We're going to do. And they start this off. And when the proof of concept becomes apparent, they hand it over back to the person running the leadership. Now, you might have, well, we both have experience
Yep.
of working in environments like this, right?
Successfully, yes.
Successfully.
When the two are, when the two are complementary and put in the right role. Yep.
Yes, and they need to be two. They cannot be competing with each other. It has to be collaborative. Mm-hmm. And I think the important thing is that every time that you have been leading or working in such an environment, mm-hmm. it almost always works.
Yeah.
Compared to, and a lot of people might relate to that as well, very often in business situations when the single leadership, it's just simply not good enough.
Yes.
A lot of people complain, oh, it doesn't work. Time changes, change comes, everything starts to collapse. People leave, nobody can, because people don't trust those in charge. And again, it's an intuitive process.
Of course.
But if you ever worked in a dual leadership model environment, you will understand right now how important it is. And I would bet my hand off that you have liked, enjoyed, or at least admired the output and the results of that model. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
My final thought on this hats thing, just to close it, is like trade in your hats for one mirror that you can hold to yourself when you need to and flip it around when you need to.
Absolutely.
Trade in the hats. All right, what's the third one?
I have one from, I will deliberately try to keep the identity of this person anonymous. I really don't want to be not nice to what I have seen, but I think this is one of extremely damaging posts, especially when it comes to working with vulnerable populations. I will explain this in more details right now. So this person and this post was written by someone who identifies him or herself as a therapist, a coach, and a speaker, and as an expert in training, in helping people who went through traumatic experiences in the past. So sufferers of trauma. Now, the post looks something like this. And again, large number of comments, large number of engagements, large number of reposts, right? That's when it gets dangerous. And it says, examples of violent and non-violent language. Okay? Violent language.
In the workplace.
It doesn't say, but it's implied from the context.
Okay.
Now, it starts with this. I was blown away. So these are the examples of the violent language, right? I was blown away. You're killing it. That's an overkill. Shoot me an email. Target audience, right? As examples of a violent language that shouldn't be used in a workplace. And this person says that when you say these things, which to be honest, to me are far more benign than saying, I know where you live, even though it doesn't use any of those bombing, exploding, killing, and words per se, is probably much more threatening, or at least it should be, right? This person says that implementing policies in workplaces that forbid people from using certain phrases and language is essential to help people who suffered from trauma or traumatic events in the past.
Okay.
Now, this is extremely damaging thing to say for multiple reasons, right? So we did engage with that particular person, that particular content. We've got response to it. People actually with trauma saying that, yeah, there's probably something wrong with that, with people who actually went through traumatic events. But I would like everyone who's listening to this to reflect, like, do you really think that if teaching people to pay attention, very close attention, to things they have zero control over, which is essentially the phrases and words that other people use or say for different reasons with different motivations, and shifting the locus of your emotional reactions to those words, right, to the external environment, does it really help you to recover and build resistance that you need to recover from trauma? Or does it do the opposite? Because we know from evidence that that type of an advice is not only helpful, it actually keeps you stuck and prevents you from recovering and building the required resistance, because it forces you or teaches you to react to things that you have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
It also forces or places an emphasis on the external environment to modify common phrases and behaviors which are not intentionally used, it would in a malicious way. Imagine working in an environment like this when you are policed for every benign thing that you say. How do we engage with our target audience can get you fired. Is that really a workplace where you want to be in? Do you think you're resilient or recovering from a traumatic event when you hear this being said in a meeting and you emotionally react to it?
Right.
Right? That's neither healthy nor necessary, right? And what I think that creating or suggesting even this expectation that everyone around you, even if something bad has happened to you, should change and adapt to what you might feel in the moment, or that it's not helpful.
No.
It's not helpful in understanding your own responses. It's not helpful in recovery, and I bet it creates a terrible working environment.
Right.
And it comes from a therapist.
And don't mistake this, let's say, trauma informed rhetoric that this person is suggesting workplaces to adopt. That is not empathy.
No.
Empathy is recognizing when someone, let's say, has had an experience that is significant, that continues to affect their daily habits, decisions, life as a result, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
help them to maybe move out of that place. Empathy is not adjusting terminology or spending a lot of time and
Mm-hmm.
energy on recognizing words instead of actually doing the work in the workplace. That's not empathy, and that's not empathetic leadership either.
No.
So I think it's not about being insensitive to whatever it is people have experienced in their past, because everybody has experienced things
Mm-hmm.
that influence their present.
Yes.
It's the decision to continue to be in an environment that will perpetuate those things.
Absolutely.
And there is a way to encourage or include discussions around diversity in a productive way,
Yes.
or equality in a productive way, or
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a workplace. There is a business, there's a mission that people are hired to do. So that's not the same thing as being sensitive and empathetic.
No. And I think there are two more elements to this that we need to discuss, and maybe a little bit of short thing I would like to say. If you've actually have been a victim of previously traumatic events, and again, we work with people like that, and we were actively helping them. When this comes from a therapist who also provides services to organizations to rewrite their policies, we believe this is dangerous. But I think that if you're suffering, please listen to this. You were never too sensitive. You were never too reactive. People are born children, they're both naked, but they're born tough and they're ready to survive in the wild world. And they have lived and survived for tens and hundreds of thousands of years. But as we go through life, you're being trained to give away your own power, all of it. And people who suggest that you react in response to an external environment like this, they take your power away from you. And it's not about becoming emotionless. It's not becoming insensitive. This is about your own emotional discipline. It's about reclaiming your true self from the world that trains you to be powerless, distracted, sensitive, and reacting, not responding, to external signals that are of little meaning. Right? Just think about this for a moment. Like every time that you don't respond to an event, to a provocation, every time you withhold an explanation, every time you don't let someone into your own emotional bedroom, you're building your mental and cognitive resilience. You're building your brain muscle, as we call it. The most powerful one in your body, right? This is where the authority comes from. This is where the self-esteem is built. This is where the self-respect is coming from, right? And your silence, non-reactivity, and self-restraint are the most powerful tools in getting away and moving past traumatic events that happen. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose how you respond, not react, right? It's not about, it's not taking things personally is very hard, but you can do this. And when you master it, when you learn and train yourself how to do that, you will become impossible to hurt, even if this hurt you or you've been hurt in the past. And it's not because you're hiding behind something, it's because you choose to be non-reactive or not respond, and don't let past events control your future life. And the world will have no choice but to respect that, what you do, right? And then people might not like it, but they will feel it and they will adjust, because people always adjust. And you will reclaim the rights and the authority to live the life on your own terms, not being completely dependent and repeatedly told to be completely dependent on random events outside that you have zero control over. Right? I think if there's somebody wants to take away from that message, please be this, those few words. We think that's important. Oh, got me angry. This particular one, right? I think it's actively harming people.
No. Well, yeah, it is. And I think it's such a strong thing, because it's not even that this is just one person spreading this. And whether someone has experienced a difficult event in the past, which probably they didn't have any choice around when it happened.
Totally.
It doesn't just impact now the people who have experienced something. It's impacts everybody. So not only are people being kept in a place emotionally who did experience something difficult, making it more difficult for them to function and work, it now sets everyone around them in a particular primed state for an emotional loop that now they will have to deal with too because of it. So it's not about awareness of,
no,
it's not a solution to awareness and an inclusive culture. and that
No, it's
leader.
the opposite.
It is the opposite.
Mhm.
So, and
Masquerading as empathy.
yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
right, right. And if you have a toxic work environment because of harassment and retaliation, okay, that is there
Different. Yeah.
there are legal and important consequences of addressing whatever the systemic or whatever the root is of that.
Mhm.
Okay, that's not the same thing as off the cuff uh statements because it may impact
Mhm.
someone in the wrong way.
Yeah,
That's a different thing.
it is. And there's this gap between what people feel and what the reality, right?
Mhm.
Which I
Mhm.
think you had a great example of that. Maybe that would be the closing example of when the reality clashes with the expectations, or
Mhm.
when people are not willing to accept this. So you told me a story recently when you were working and you've been watching or listening to people being interviewed
Oh,
for a senior position. I think that's a great example. I think this is something that we should finish with
oh, okay.
today.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, and I wrote about this too recently because I thought it was important.
Mhm.
Because there's also, we don't have a particular post to reference, but if I ask the audience to think about the last post they saw on executive presence, I'm sure something comes to mind, right?
Mhm.
Presentation skills, how you, maybe body language,
Yes, the usual.
say, what
Yeah.
phrases to say, or even just how to interview with executive presence, right? How to close, what questions to ask, how to follow up, all of these things. But what it doesn't say at all is the importance of your appearance. Maybe because it should be, maybe that is considered to be intuitive. I don't know, but I think it should. And it doesn't talk about the perceptions and judgments and assumptions that the panel or the interviewer will make
Yes.
automatically.
Yes.
So the scene is, which this is completely true. I'm working in public. There's interviews being conducted at the table near me, like
Mhm.
all afternoon, for a chief technical officer, probably in pharmaceutical industry, because I think that's, I mean, I wasn't completely eavesdropping, but there's a lot of medical background of all of these candidates. There's a lot of industry experience. There's globalization. There's all of
Mhm.
so these are like men who are. This would be a promotion, and for some of them, it sounded like a considerable promotion, and they've been successful leading up to this point.
Mhm. So
So, and
essentially interviewing for like a C-suite type
yeah,
of a
for sure,
role. Okay.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. So you've got your CTO role,
Mhm.
and there were typical questions, how would you take the business from how would you what would you propose for business growth? How do you address culture? Things like that. Because that is important. And there's answers that a C-suite executive would be expected to
Yes.
give
Of
and
course.
stand by and demonstrate. And there was a candidate who was so eloquent and and so authentic, rehearsed, ready, I would say prepared,
Mhm.
and like it had all of this amazing experience. It was almost like a too good to be true situation,
Mhm.
but he was extremely overweight and really struggled with respiratory fitness, getting up and down, shaking hands, moving up and down the stairs.
Mhm.
This is not a judgment on obesity and weight management because I'm talking about this, working with people about this for many, many years. So it's not that. But the reality is that this candidate who was excellent won't get the CTO role. He won't. And you could tell because of a few things. One was the insecurity that came out in his answers when he was asked questions about themes like consistency and self-discipline and endurance, even.
And that's unconscious, right?
It's unconscious. It's not that the interviewer said, how do you take care of yourself or something? And there are, again, assumptions, judgments that the brain will automatically make. And yes, the interviewer will follow HR approved questions that attempt to remove that unconscious bias because that's what they're designed to do. But there's really almost no escaping the inevitability.
No.
You remove it, and that is not going to put that candidate right back into those assumptions and judgments that are made anyway.
Despite being the most competent
yes.
from the people who have been interviewed. Well, and I think so because you've mentioned three elements here, and I think it's quite interesting or important to outline them. So human brain evolved from animal, reptile, and then mammalian, and then the neocortex, the new brain, the reasonal brain that we have. And we know that there are two places in the brain where everything related to talking sits in, right? It's the part of the brain that's responsible for processing speech and then for speaking, and they are found themselves in neocortex. They're evolutionarily very new. But the truth is that on those deeper levels, when we make those subconscious and automatic reactions, the brain is much more visual and emotional. And when you're interviewing someone for a leadership role, there are two scripts, two programs that are running in your brain. The first one is evaluating where do you sit on the hierarchy ladder in the place where you are. Right? That's one. And the second one makes subconscious judgments, whether you like it or not, about your appearance. If you appear as if, regardless of what the reason is, as if you are unable to take care of yourself, how can you be expected to take care of other people? And we all make those constantly, this adjustment in our brain, because we're deciding, it's a survival mechanism, who to trust. Who do we follow?
Exactly.
Am I going to follow someone who visibly cannot take care of themselves? Why would they be able to take care of me?
Yeah.
And no matter whether we even think about this or not, that decision is being processed in the back of the brain. And the visual cues are much more important than anything that the candidate can say.
Now, can we pause for a moment? Because if people are listening to this, I'm sure there are some people that are thinking, yeah, I've been on both sides of that. It's no different than, you have an important romantic date coming up and you do some extra workout in advance, right? It's the same thing. Then you might have people on the other side saying, well, but maybe it's not his fault. Maybe he has a condition.
He might.
But do you see what your brain is doing? Even just listening to us having this conversation, you're already justifying in one way or another and putting yourself into that situation because that's what brains do.
Yes. And your explanation were dependent whether you are normal weight, underweight, or overweight. Exactly. You will become, and we can probably with large degree predict what the thoughts in your head right now are.
And whether you've ever been in a situation for a leadership role.
Yes.
The other personal stuff that comes from your own inherent value system when it comes to your workplace and your career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of it, right? But there are other elements of appearance that you actually do have a control over, right? But it all comes to certain habits. And and we help people do this, when you set your compass right, then things like taking care of yourself becomes in different ways, right? It's not even for the purpose of losing weight. When you build habits for the future that you want for yourself or need for yourself, those behaviors are automatic, and the change in your appearance is just a byproduct of it. Yeah. And they don't require that much effort. But you need to be able to ask yourself, what are the things that matter to you? Because maintaining your appearance takes time, energy, and money.
That's right.
And it's not going to happen on its own. Now, there are now shortcuts that people try to take So we have the injections that you can take right now to suddenly become slimmer, right? But it still does not solve for the problem, for the underlying problem, because even if you eventually would land that job, you're not going to last there for a long time, right? Because if you are unable to prioritize what is important for you to be in a place where you want to be, it's just not going to work. And the currency that you will pay for that mistake is your mental health and well-being. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's partially why a lot of people in similar roles struggle with substance abuse, with self-destructive behaviors, with a lot of uncertainty, right? We work with those leaders, we know what it looks like. And it's sometimes a very, very dirty, very unpleasant place to be. And a lot of people realize that they have gotten themselves into that point, but they never really wanted to. I think that's quite interesting, right? That's quite eye-opening as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other hand, the other side of that is this is also why a lot of people in those roles establish habits for themselves, like getting up at 4:30 and working out, or working out at a time, or meal prepping in a certain way, or whatever it takes, knowing what their default decision will be once they run out of energy to make it.
Exactly. And your purpose is what you're willing to sacrifice to get what you really truly want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example.
But the brain fills it in so fast for yourself and for others, despite your best effort, right? It is just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to reiterate what you said, if it's important to you, getting to a certain role, being in a certain position, maybe there's certain visibility that comes with it or responsibility. It's not just to look a certain way. It's like start telling and training your brain that that is who you are and that is what you are, so that it can, the split second automatic things that it's doing for you are already aligned to whatever that is important to you.
Yeah, priming. We call this priming.
Yeah. I mean, there's many other ways to do this, right?
Yes.
But that's just one thing to start doing.
And one thing that you should be reflecting on is, what are you willing to sacrifice for what you think matters to you? Is sacrificing sleep and health worth the thing that you're chasing? Is sacrificing family, interest, hobbies something that is worth whatever you're looking at? Those are important things to answer yourself, because we typically see the tip of an iceberg, right? We see the success. Oh, there's a successful athlete. He's so great, right? Plays, runs fast or plays amazing, in sports. And we look and admire, and everybody would like to have that success. But nobody's willing to take everything else that's behind that success, right? 15 years of waking up at 4 a.m., right? Doing 4 hours of hard work before going to work or school. And when you finish, when everybody goes home watching TV or socializing, you go back into training, into the swimming pool, onto the field, right? Or on the track. And you keep doing this 365 days a year. Sleep 4 or 5 hours, right? Eat meals on the clock. Never taste anything you like, right? Tremendous sacrifice, injuries, and so on and so on. That's the price. Everybody wants the success. Nobody's willing to pay the price. So always be mindful. What is it going to cost you in terms of your resources, right? It's one of the very first things we teach when we work with people is this: how do you manage your limited amount of time, energy, and money in your life? Yeah. And what is willing to be sacrificed? It's a great example. Great.
Great. Well, let's see what LinkedIn has to offer this
next week.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on the Solutions Manual podcast, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.